So welcome everyone to an insightful legal tech talks in conjunction with NetDocuments. My name is Frances Anderson. I'm the CEO of NetLaw Media, and I'm delighted to welcome you here today, where we're going to be discussing making a case for AI in legal. Today we're going to be looking at building an AI strategy, workflow, responsible use of generative AI by legal professionals, deep diving into the promise and pitfalls of generative AI, significantly improving matter efficiency, and then also uniting the power of generative AI with the security of the NetDocuments platform. Now, today we have 5 very special guests with us, where they're going to be exploring the nature of building a case for AI implementation against the ever-increasing client demands and the drive for business efficiency for increased client satisfaction. Now, leading today's session is Tara Walters, a partner and head of Ashurst Advanced Digital, who will be chairing the session and who will bring you into the debate should you have any questions near to the end. The session is live, and if you'd like to speak with Tara and or the additional panel members and ask them a question, please do so through the chat or the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of the screen, or you can raise your hand during the debate and we will be bringing you in live into the discussion nearer to the end, as I said earlier. Now, moving forward, our chair of today's roundtable is a partner and head of Ashurst Advanced Digital, the technology arm of the firm's new law division, Ashurst Advanced. She's a technologist turned lawyer with over 20 years' experience working in the technology and legal industries, and has more recently married these 2 disciplines in her current role, where she's developing the Ashurst new digital products and service offerings. So without further ado, welcome, Tara. And again, thank you for everyone who has joined us today. Now, I'm delighted to hand the running of this over to you, and we can take it from there.
Thanks very much, Frances. And welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many people online and to join us. Today, we're talking about, continuing to talk about the topic du jour, generative AI, but genuinely hoping to make this really practical, because I genuinely believe that some of the best way for each of us to understand how to drive change and look at this technology within our own organizations requires us to talk to each other and actually understand who's doing what and practically what can and should we be doing. So I think for those of you on the line who are being involved in these types of activities within your own organizations, often the first hurdle is getting that important buy-in from both your senior stakeholders as well as the broader community within your organization. So we're going to step through, what does it take? What does that business case need to look like? What are the key considerations? And we're going to hear from our expert panels who have that experience already, and hopefully will be able to impart their insights, their lessons and learnings for you to take away and apply in your own organizations. So without further ado, we'll just quickly introduce the panel and then we'll jump into crafting our business cases. So I'm just going to go on my screen. Let's start with Jill.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Shornack. I'm the VP of Product at NetDocuments. I've spent 20 plus years in legal tech, working through quite a few different, evolutions of technology, but certainly none like what we're seeing today. We're living in this moment where legal workflow, just every step is being reimagined with the help of AI. And at NetDocuments, I have the honor of managing a portfolio that includes a very special and powerful legal workflow automation tool called Pattern Builder. And then more recently, its extension called Pattern Builder Max, which really weaves together the generative AI capabilities along with the customer's information and knowledge that's stored within NetDocuments. And I like to joke that I could talk about AI all day long, but I think someone took that quite literally because it is 4 a.m. my time. But I am happy to be here. I'm told there's folks across the globe on the call today, which is really great. So thanks for having me on the call.
To your commitments, Jill. Thank you. Let's move on to Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm CTO here at Lewis Silkin. Lewis Silkin is a mid-size UK city law firm. I'm newish, not into the legal profession, at least compared to Jill and some of the others on the panel. 2.5 years in as the first CTO for Lewis Silkin, but a history in system integration and innovation in other industries. We're, I think, like everyone else, on the journey for generative AI. We adopted Pattern Builder Max as part of the early adopter pilots. We're also just starting a co-pilot pilot, which I love saying. and we're really working through, what does this mean for a mid-sized city firm.
Moving on to Sarah.
Thanks, Tara. So I'm Sarah Harris. I'm the innovation partner at Kingsley Napley. I'm a barrister by background, initially at the criminal bar, but then moving into regulatory field. Having become a partner in the reg team at KN in about 2015, I was working mainly on sort of larger contract client cases. So I was looking a lot more at sort of higher volume, lower value cases, hence why legal tech, process improvement, and the application of those things to the legal sector were very much on my radar quite a long time ago, hence my interest in them. So I am now in a central innovation role at the firm, which essentially involves working with lots of other teams in the business as well as external stakeholders to kind of bring value to the firm and its clients, more recently using Gen AI.
Great. And finally, Joe.
Thanks, Tara. Yeah, so Joe Cohen, Director of Innovation at Charles Russell Speechlys, which is an international law firm specializing in private capital. Until December, I was the head of innovation at Dentons UK Ireland Middle East for 5 years. Previously worked at some other Magic Circle law firms, previous to that in innovation roles. Have had a fair bit of experience with generative AI. We've got big plans here as well in a few different phases. So talk about some of those and looking forward to the session.
Thanks all. So I think we're going to start, at hopefully the basics of you need to put a business case for generative AI in your organization. First question is, who is actually responsible for putting that business case? Is it the innovation team? Is it the technology team? And who are you actually submitting that to? Be grateful to hear from everyone actually how your organizations have been dealing with that or your own experience. We'll let everyone jump in.
Well, I can start if you'd like. I can just speak from kind of what I've been seeing across our customer set, and then maybe the other folks can jump in with their specifics. But innovation teams or internal development teams across some of our customers, they have been really the quickest, I think, to transition from learners to creators, which is kind of that transition time that we're really in right now, at least what I've been seeing. But the biggest transformation has really been within the knowledge management area, if I'm being honest, like the people who are really leaning in and wanting to have these conversations faster. I've been seeing that they're historically been just in charge of curating gold standard documents, making them accessible, putting them in a repository, kind of hoping and training folks to remember to apply them when they're doing their work. And now they're really kind of transitioning into this area of workflow building and taking those best practices and precedent and embedding them directly into the workflow so that it's being enforced as the actions are happening. I think it's a very empowering time for that organization, but it does require a shift in their focus and a shift in the work that they're doing. And oftentimes the tools are required to do it. And so I see that group kind of spearheading the creation of business cases.
I'm happy to go next, Tara. So at least when it comes to generative AI, it's fairly front of mind. You don't have to do much in order to achieve that. But what you do need to make sure is to get senior management, bought into a plan. I think it is important to have a plan. So, we're going to at least widely trial or widely roll out this particular tool. It's fairly generic, but it is important that senior management are okay with that because often there is, investment they need to make. My view is that most law firms at this point are ready, in inverted commas, they're ready, but you just need to get over the line and get something kind of firm approved into the hands of everybody, lawyers and business services, in order to actually properly, start that journey.
Yeah, I think for us, what we found is that our board makes the decision. I'm, as chief technology officer, I recommend and build the business case for it. What we really focused on was less around we're going to make this investment in technology, but making sure that if we made an investment in the technology, that we had the people lined up ready to do the work to use it. So as Jill said, this is coming right from the heart of the knowledge community, and having the knowledge partners really engage, having the professional support lawyers ready with, you know, the use cases that they wanted to see built out and experiment with. That was really important. That's a lesson we learned from our rollout of our document automation solutions, that it's great investing in those tools, but unless you actually have people ready to automate documents, it doesn't add very much value. So we've been more thinking about, is the business ready to do this more than is the technology ready to do it? And that's been kind of our way of building that business case.
Yeah, I think I'd say the same around, you know, I don't think it's a case anymore of persuading that this needs to be a huge priority. I think everyone, the length and breadth of the organisation, realises we have to do something. But I think the trick is, what's the practical business case? Like, what steps are we going to make in terms of putting one foot in front of the other? And I think, you know, as Joe said, it's a case of just doing practical things to get this technology, powerful technology, in the hands of people and start learning without being overwhelmed by all the things that are possible and all the things you could do, because there's just a wealth of use cases. But just pick a couple and make it less overwhelming, I think is where we're at.
Right. I think all really helpful insights. Certainly that resonates with me in terms of how our firm's been approaching it as well, making sure it is a multidisciplinary approach, and you have to be engaging with the users and the people, and not just proposing some technology. But on that topic, what is actually being proposed? So now within Ashurst, we always kind of take what we refer to as this digital venturing approach. So that it's just that classic buy, build, partner, invest options. And sometimes it's one or the other. Sometimes it's actually a mix of those. What types of solutions are you actually looking at? Are you building yourself? Are you looking at third party? Are you doing a mix? Let's start with Joe, because I think a lot of us probably do know what Joe's been involved in, but let's hear from you first.
Sure. So, okay, yeah. So I can talk about. I'll start with my Denton's previous role, and then I'll give a few words on where we are currently here. So obviously at Denton's we rolled out Fleet AI in September. That was quite good. It was a longer project. Started probably around March time. Big partnership with Microsoft, etc. Rolled out firm wide. Probably were on about half the firm as active users after month 2. But I think the tool itself, fairly broad. I think there was a lot of people doing so many different things in it. And we'll talk about use cases a little bit later. But it was legal specific. But I think ultimately it was just something that was firm branded. It was robust. It had GPT-4 in it, which was novel at the time. You could put documents into it, and I think that's now 5-6 months on. A lot of firms have kind of got something similar, which I think is fair. The chat use case is the easiest one, and I think it's probably the most sensible one to start with. In terms of build versus buy, I do think that the availability of these very powerful large language models as APIs really puts the power in the hands of the buyer, so the law firms, to create their own stuff. And I think that will put a fair amount of cost pressure on suppliers, and actually I suspect that over this year and maybe next year as well, you will see your existing suppliers integrating GPT-4 almost as a matter of course, as opposed to trying to charge really large amounts to it. And I think it will be that particularly the chat case will become a bit more kind of table stakes. In terms of Charles Speech Leads, we've got very ambitious plans, as you might imagine, in a few different very interesting stages, trying to move from the table stakes to where we can prove some really significant value to differentiate, but they're not haven't been announced internally yet, so can't detail them here, but hopefully over the next month or so.
I think for us as a mid-sized firm, we're not probably building quite the way that, say, Denton's could. We're looking at not pure buy, although we've just rolled out Copilot for Microsoft 365. There are products like that I think are probably more for our business teams, where those are products that people will use. But on the legal side, legal team side, what I think we'll do is we'll take more of a platform approach to try and find something that we're not building right at the API level, but we are able to build a product that is quite tightly specified within the way that we expect our lawyers to work. So they don't have to become prompt engineers. They don't need to be using that kind of full chat interface, but not right down to the level of us coding directly against the APIs. So somewhere in between. The other thing I would say is there's just so many products in the market at the moment that we took a view that we just had to pick something and start working on it and start building experience. I think Joe's absolutely right. There will be consolidation in the market. There will be more products kind of coming through and being built into the everyday legal tools we already use. But while that's shaking out, we just wanted to make sure we were getting as much value as early as possible and learning as much as we possibly could.
Yeah, so it resonates really well with what Alex is saying in terms of the size of our law firm. We're not in the business of at this juncture of building complex technology that's already out there. We're in the same sort of boat of getting the value and collaborating with people that do have that expertise. And I think that's okay. I think, it's okay to say to people within the firm, we're working with this person who's got deep expertise in this particular area. And also I think it helps us focus very much on the client experience. So making whatever we build hugely client focused and focusing more on the training of that and how it's going to land, and getting that kind of more agile startup feedback. And that's where our focus has been, rather than the actual nuts and bolts of the technology, which, we very much rely on some sort of close collaboration with subject matter experts. So that's where we're at. And again, that will change, I think, as we go forward. But as Alex says, just here and now, that's where our focus has been.
As a product manager, I'm very curious about product design and kind of the various approaches that, vendors and even legal departments and law firms are engaging in. And I've seen kind of the wide spectrum, right? As everyone said here, everyone's kind of on a different journey and different, ability in their organization to either, try to look for a point solution, engage in a chatbot, build something internally. Everybody's kind of on their own, in various parts of that journey. So maybe from my perspective, it's kind of the things to be on the lookout for, or as you're engaging in these different solutions, be really aware of the opportunities and the risks of different approaches. Like, for example, if you're engaging in kind of that chatbot format, you just have to know that the power of prompt design is really important, right? And it's really sensitive as well. So even the smallest change, right? I'm sure most of the folks on this call has probably experimented a little bit, and you would know that every little change you make of the way you would ask a question, it's going to be so different, right? Even the five of us would probably ask the question a little bit differently, and the output would be quite different based on the way that you ask the large language model to generate a task. And if you put that kind of burden on each individual in your organization, it can introduce a lot of risk. Even if you're training, even if you're trying to drive compliance, that's something just to be aware of. And so I'll see a lot of folks kind of swing to the other side of the spectrum of solutions where they kind of are looking for a point solution, something that's off the shelf, something that's ready-made. And the thing to be aware of there is, it's kind of kept that power of prompt design can be kept in a black box. And what that means is you don't have access to the prompt, and you're only really exposed to that user interface, which is great too. It's very kind of easy button like for the user. But what that means is it could require either significant configuration as you're trying to tailor that to your organization, or, you might not have the flexibility to make it exactly how you like. So I guess from a product perspective, my advice would be to look for a tool that gives you the control over how AI is being used, and try and look for kind of that central team that would help build, help test, make sure that you're liking what that output looks like before you roll it out to the rest of the organization. That really kind of puts the power of AI in your hands with, mitigating the risk and as well.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, Jill. And I think that's personal view here is I think that's why we've seen a lot of headlines about law firms building their own, and there are, Azure toolkits and things like that make that a lot more accessible than, building software from the ground up has been, which a lot of law firms don't actually do. Alex, I just want to pick up one point, Alex, that you made around that differentiation actually of your user base and recognizing that there are some use cases that are actually business focused versus legal services focused. And I just wanted to kind of pick that up for a moment to see if there were actually views in terms of different solutions for different user groups, or if you're thinking more about a same solution, but just thinking about the different ways your users are using them.
We're definitely splitting. I mean, I think we will probably build in Builder Max, some stuff that is non-legal specific. I built a proofreading tool in it the other day, which is non-legal specific. So there are some things we will do there, but if I think about the functionality that maybe Adobe Firefly has, or the Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365, or Copilot for Sales, we're a Dynamics 365 shop. All of those tools have generative AI that can help people develop pitches. I can see huge benefit for Microsoft 365 Copilot for our finance people in Excel, or whatever it is. That's not something you're going to try and recreate yourself in a platform like Builder Max or any of the kind of legal specific tools. So I think it will be horses for courses, but I'm trying to manage that down to a handful rather than 30 or 40 that then have a meaningful burden, in terms of management to manage those.
Any other views on that in terms of user base?
And I need to say, I think actually an interesting corollary of what Alex is saying around sort of there being sort of more potentially satellite technology in different parts of the business, certainly when you've got multiple practice areas, that can be a real journey for certainly for law firms, certainly for us, around sort of devolvement of responsibility in terms of these are web-based applications. There's a kind of releasing of the sort of having to go to IT and go through various processes. There's a real sort of devolvement of, well, this is our problem, this is what we're going to define the problem as, this is how we're going to fix it. I think that's something that we're all learning as well, in terms of as a process, allowing people to have that freedom to do what they want, but equally making sure that we're still aligned with strategy, all sort of pointing in the same direction, using the technology we have in the best way. And I think that's I personally, that's a real journey, and not without sort of growing pains.
Yeah. There is a relevant question in the chat around that buy versus build question. And someone has noted actually that the building capability now, for example, using Azure, the cost, in addition to accessibility, the costs have come down significantly. So that if you do have the in-house skills to leverage that would be a strong recommendation from that person. And anyone want to throw their views?
I agree. I agreed with that. I saw that one come up. I think that's good. I mean, ultimately, I suppose that's what that is a good approach. Did that at Denton's, although albeit collaborating with an external developer. I think that again, it goes back to what I was saying before about leveraging, the Azure GPT-4 APIs, etc. You prompt library front end, great idea. There are, if you look carefully, there are some very particular architectural points that are not necessarily obvious to, your in-house developers at law firms. It's doable, but I think that experience of working with similar types of, maybe like RASA chatbots or, older school chatbots, just on the architecture side, I think was helpful. But yeah, certainly, I think more efficient. If you're going to buy a really expensive similar tool, that just to build it, I think is preferable in my opinion.
One of the lessons that we've learned at NetDocuments is, especially when it comes to building a business case, having the opportunity to have a real quick win, like a quick use case to showcase the value of AI, so that you can either generate that groundswell of supporters organizationally, or just kind of have that that proof point that substantiates the business case is important. So what we've done at NetDocuments is kind of the best of both worlds, kind of creating in-house, of course, in partnership with our customers, specific use cases that we put in a repository called ND Max Studio. So they're like off-the-shelf apps, prompts that are that have already been kind of created and curated and tested, and you can lift those right off the shelf. So day one, you have those apps, you can run them. It's summarizing documents, extraction, like kind of those core use cases that you would expect for AI. But the cool thing from there is that you still have the ability to tailor it. So all of the access to the way that it's been prompted. You can tweak it, tailor it, make it your own. You can even create bespoke apps from scratch if you wanted, if you were there as an organization. And like I said before, that everybody's on a different, at a different place in their journey or at a different place in their abilities in-house to leverage those capabilities. So it's kind of nice to be able to have that off-the-shelf value so that you can build that business case, but also maintain the flexibility so that when you do have that knowledge or the capabilities or the resources, you can leverage the tool in that way as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, certainly, again, I think, a strategy needs to consider all of the options and hopefully be adaptable and flexible enough to capitalize on the opportunities. My personal view is, especially now, I think, the Gen AI solution market is not very mature, right? We've seen a handful of brand new providers come through. And now what we're seeing is a lot of the existing providers talk about what they're layering in. So whilst that sort of market settles down, if you have the ability to capitalize on leveraging the toolkits that are now available to start actually implementing within the firm, it seems like a great option. And it genuinely is quite quick. Within our firm, we built a proof of concept chatbot, so nothing rolled out, but we did that within 5 weeks. And it was stood up within the first week, and then it was 4 weeks of refinement, etc. So certainly for anyone that's not testing and trialing that, and they have some internal capability, do think about it. Okay, so we've talked a bit about possible solutions and strategies of how to pick what type of solution you want to be looking towards. What are you actually using them for? What are the use cases, and how are you proving out that there are, what is good and what is less good, and what are the benefits that are delivering to help convince those skeptics?
I don't mind going first, Tara, because we've sort of in line with the sort of pick a lane and just run with it rather than being sort of stagnated by looking at the different options. One of the key focuses that I've been looking at is more external facing use cases, mainly because of the sort of, obviously we have got internal use cases, but in terms of external, I feel like it's a true innovation in terms of not just making more efficient the current process of law and looking at it in a completely different way in terms of how clients are going to consume those and how we're going to procure legal services. So we've been looking a lot more specifically at external use cases and how we can sell our services in a completely externalized way with sort of subscription-based offerings and how what that's going to look like. And in terms of how we've been testing that, it's essentially with sort of beta clients and sort of asking them, how did you feel about this? What would you like to see? What didn't you like to see? What worries you? What troubles you? What questions are you going to ask of us? And so I think that's where our focus has been, not to the exclusion of other things, but we've very much been a kind of, let's look at how we're really going to transform legal services rather than let's just make what we currently do that little bit quite a lot quicker, but nonetheless the same sort of processes. So that's kind of where I've been placing my efforts in the past sort of 6 to 12 months. But I know others probably have a different approach.
So I'll have a go, Tara. So yeah, I think the approach that we took was just we gave some kind of high level guidance, right? To help with strategy, drafting, negotiating, summarizing, new legislation or cases, good second pair of eyes, loads and loads of kind of like spin-off use cases came from those ultimately, because we didn't really give any specifics at all in the initial. I mean, our training session when we launched Fleet AI was kind of like 2 half-an-hour webinars, probably had half the firm dial in. And yet, we were on about 20,000, 20,000 queries a week by the end. And I think it was really interesting to see what people kind of figured out was best for them. And it's really important to make sure that you kind of go back around the department, maybe that's something that trainees can get involved with, and try to just keep, every month, every other month, up-to-date lists of exactly what people are using it for in their teams, what prompts are working well, going back to the prompt library thing in the front end, what prompts work well, what prompts don't work well, which documents work well, which documents don't work well. I think is, so instead of doing the use cases up front, you kind of retrospectively do them. I do absolutely agree with Sarah that it's probably more important to think about, how will the actual delivery of legal services transform as opposed to doing what you do more quickly. I think our approach is like the first stage was, okay, well, let's get people using it, in the chat, the ad hoc, easiest way. And then the subsequent phases can be looking at, automating the production of particularly the reports by using template prompts, which are agreed, something that Jill was talking about before, which was absolutely the right thing to do. We did have some of the more interesting stuff that you can maybe look at. One example on the kind of document production side was taking witness interviews, recording them, which the lawyers would do anyway, and turning them into witness statements by using different prompts. Actually can't be used in core disputes for that because of different regulations, but certainly for employment tribunals it can be done, but more generally can be used kind of in the background for different preparation. And that, some of those witness statements, you could spend 4 or 5 days as a lawyer doing one witness statement. So even if you could save one day by getting to a good starting point fairly quickly, it is quite meaningful.
I think there's an obvious, we always kind of focus on the document production side of this, and we are doing some of that. I think what we're finding is it's an interesting blend of generative and sort of traditional automation. So there's bits where we will sort of automate 2/3 of the letter because we know who we are, we know how we want our client to be described, we know what the actions we want to take, we want the opposing party to take. That's all standard. But the summary of the case and extracting information out of reports, that generative AI lends itself to, especially when those reports might be in different formats from different experts or whatever it is. So for that document production, I think people should think about actually where does generative AI lend itself really strongly, and actually where is it prone to hallucination. And so trying to blend those two approaches we've been quite successful with. The bits that I'm quite excited about, and it sort of tags on to 2 questions we've had in the Q&A about engaging knowledge management and also about case management, is really around knowledge extraction or data extraction. So being able to use generative AI kind of in reverse almost to extract summaries, make sure that good metadata is getting into our systems, that we can look back across a history of cases and say, where have we advised this client on this stuff before? So we're not creating something de novo, but we're saying, like, the last 3 times you asked us this question, here was the answer, which often isn't as easy as it should be in some of these systems that we have. So actually using it for knowledge, using it to extract good example, clauses, good examples of where we've done similar work that might be orthogonal to the way that we would generally file documents on a kind of client matter basis. I think that's where there's a really big, powerful, opportunity here. We all sit on huge amounts of unstructured data, and Gen AI has the ability to kind of get a handle on some of that, I think, and those are probably where some of the best use cases in legal are going to come from, rather than maybe the document production stuff, which is the kind of easier bit to understand, and so is where most people focus, I think.
Yeah, I see a lot of that kind of low-hanging fruit, right? Like that's a nice and easy way to start. It's that barrier of getting from a learner to creator and really figuring out where you want to begin, which use cases you want to start with. And, it's been kind of tricky for some users with, thinking about pattern or max because it is so versatile. What does it do? Our answer is like, well, it does everything, right? Which isn't a great answer. out the gate, because you really want to be able to hone in on some specific value right out the gate. So when we are brainstorming with customers about how they want to, where they want to start, we, say, start with that non-billable work, right? Look at that low-hanging fruit. Look at the tasks that you have to write off because clients won't pay for them, or the those productivity gains that are really going to help you free up time for either billable work or helps you with cost control if you have fixed or flat fee arrangements. Those are the types of places that we see our customers starting with, and then broadening out. But kind of getting back to the business case creation, those are really easy things to quantify. You can say, here's a use case that used to take us 2 hours to do, or whatever it is. And we do this, we run this type of document, if we're going down the use case that Alex was talking about, kind of the document generation piece, that took us 20 minutes and now it takes us, 2 minutes. You can easily quantify that, that impact and create those proof points in a business case.
Yeah, I think that definition of value, being able to quantify, is really important, whether or not you're looking at use cases that are more efficiency driven versus, like Sarah and KN, where actually you're thinking about how can I partner with my client and actually make sure I'm delivering something more external. And I think certainly in my experience, that's a huge carrot from a law firm perspective. If you can go to your partners and say, hey, I can help you look good in front of your clients and maybe get more work, I think that's always a huge driver. And then you can be sort of in parallel also really refining that efficiency engine within the firm and gathering those data points that will, of course, take a bit longer with your clients beyond just pure revenue, and being able to point to the things that aren't purely financial metrics, that actually are more around the experience and the improvement of the experience of how people are working, I think is something law firms in general, the industry in general, doesn't always appreciate as fully as I certainly like them to, especially at the outset. I did want to just throw in a quick anecdote, which is within our firm, we actually did a head-to-head of a few different Gen AI solutions, looking at the case summarization use case, which is probably the first place a lot of people start. Let me throw a 100-page case judgment and see what spits out. We actually did a head-to-head, including having a group of trainees do that manually as they would now. And in all cases but one, we had them judged blind by our expertise team. Actually, the humans won out, which is we thought was incredibly interesting. That doesn't mean that was done in a more efficient way. Certainly using Gen AI tools enabled them to do that faster, but actually in terms of the ultimate quality, looking at quality, accuracy, completeness, tone, style, all of those things, actually there's still a lot of value in the human. So I think no one suggested yet, but we're definitely not in a place where we're looking at these tools as replacing what people do, but it is making that work more tech enabled and hopefully making the humans create those better outputs, which I think is an important message also from a business case perspective to give your stakeholders some comfort. Okay, so we've talked a bit about what we might want to be embedding in terms of tech capabilities, what we want to use it for, what our users are getting value out of it, and what our clients are getting value out of. But okay, let's look a little bit take a moment to think a bit about the risks. What are the dependencies? What are we worried about? What are our stakeholders worried about? What are our people worried about? And what do we have to try to assuage concerns about?
I'm happy to go. So, okay. I think people are worried a bit in different ways. I think people do see fee models shifting. Maybe not right now, but this year, something we'll definitely see, exploring different ways of pricing work. And I think ultimately there will be conversations around pricing less for time and more for value. And that is not so easy to do. Although if you think about how lawyers used to charge, and we're probably going back 50, 60 years, it was, particularly on the corporate work, it was as a percentage of the value of the deal, right? So I think over time, legal work and how, the hourly rate came about and the fixed fees, I think there have been changes. So it's not necessarily a surprise, but I think it's something people will have to try, kind of get to grips with. I think in terms of training, there is definitely a point of, and actually Tara, your point around, the trainees had the best output. I'm not surprised by that either, but I suppose that the real point there is the trainees using the AI would have produced the best output, right? As opposed to doing it manually or relying completely on the machine. But then again, if they're relying on it too much, then, perhaps they're not learning in the right ways. And I think there is a structural training point there for the seniors who have maybe a bit less validation of the AI answers that they need to do to kind of quiz the trainees on, okay, well, you saved a lot of time doing this task using AI, but can you fully explain it to me? And they need to be able to do that, at least for the first time. And, so actually there is kind of probably a curve where the first time you use AI, if you need to fully validate it from elsewhere, then you're probably going to take a bit longer. But that's almost besides the point, because we need to look a bit past that. So, yes, I think that the two points to consider there.
I think for us, sorry, John.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think one of the big challenges with this is around data and making sure that you've spent the time to curate the data to be passing the best examples into the generative AI system, particularly for document drafting. And that is a bit of a chicken and egg problem that, you can sort of maybe bootstrap it with using generative AI to extract it, but you do need knowledge lawyers in the loop to help you find those. Somebody's asked in the Q&A, are there any views about whether pointing Gen AI into the document management system is valuable? I think there are pros and cons. Working in the DMS is great because actually it's, to a certain extent, a walled garden and you're working where your lawyers are. It's finding the right bits of data in the DMS to make sure that you're only generating from documents you really trust. So, we're using our precedence cabinet as base documents rather than just going, let's point at anything and see what agreements we have we can use. It's curating that data and making sure you're feeding really good data into those tools as part of the prompt. So yeah, that's where we're focusing.
It was a really interesting use case. And it was exactly that, Alex. Someone was like, oh, this is a really great tool. Can't wait to use it. If only I had a playbook defined, right? We were kind of going through the use case of, looking at third-party contracts and comparing it against your playbook and very quickly being able to identify the differences and provide recommendations on how you might change it. And they're like, oh, that's fantastic, but I don't have a playbook. And we're like, no problem, right? You can still, have a bunch of documents and use AI to do entity extraction, put them into a data table, evaluate, decide which documents or which parts of the document represent your best practice. You use that to curate your own set of documents to create the playbook and then be able to leverage that use case. So sometimes you need to take a step back and think about that process in increments and kind of think, can the tools be used in a different way? But I thought that was kind of interesting. But the one kind of question that I get consistently, and it's almost always the first question I get now, is around like hallucinations and, is the output from the large language models too generic? I'm special. I do things a little bit differently. So to your same point, Alex, right? Leveraging your own knowledge and your information that sits in your repository in your DMS is really helpful. But then the next follow-up question is, well, how do I keep myself, off the front page of the newspaper and sharing any of that really important data, but that is also very private data. And so that's something that at NetDocuments we've taken really, we've really focused on. We take it as a high standard of security measures, of course, in the legal space. And, couple things to think about is, putting that into the DMS allows us to at least inherit the security measures that live within, your documents, right? Your ACLs and kind of your ethical walls. All of those things will apply to the way that AI is being deployed in your organization through that tool. But the other thing I would say is we have a partnership with Microsoft that's pretty fast and strong. And what that's allowed us to get is exemptions from their filtering and monitoring. So if you don't know how OpenAI works, generally any piece of information you put in there, all the output is subject to filtering and monitoring, which goes through an algorithm which tries to flag, breaches of policy. And if it does kind of trigger that flag, it'll be sent to a person at Microsoft who might see it. And it's like, oh gosh, illegal. That's a high security risk. We don't want that to happen. And so we're able to advocate for our customers and for the legal vertical as a whole and say, like, this it can't work that way, right? It has to work differently if it's going to be effective in the legal services industry. And so we do have an exemption. So any information that's put into Pattern Builder Max, any output that's generated from the large language model is not stored. It's not seen. It's exempt from the filtering and monitoring, which means you can leverage your precedent, your best practices within NetDocuments while keeping kind of confidentiality safeguarded. I think that's a really, really important thing for a lot of our customers.
Can I just say one thing on the back of that? So yeah, it's as Jill's mentioning, that's available from within Azure for the API itself. And as far as I know, someone please do correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, you can't do that in Copilot. So you can't; those exemptions are not available from within Microsoft Copilot. So if people are thinking about Copilot, then just know that if your message is flagged for whatever reason, then it is possible that it could be seen.
That's right. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that exemption does not exist in Copilot, as far as I understand. They don't with the paid versions, which of the Copilots, because there's lots of different ones, and the naming's extremely confusing. They don't store those prompts. They don't use them for training. So there are, for me at least, two concerns. There's the oversight bit, which is clearly a concern, but there's also the storage and training of prompts and outputs. That doesn't occur, as far as I understand from reviewing the commercial documents, for any of the Microsoft paid Copilots. But you're right, that flagging of potentially harmful content is not exempt within Copilots. And for those of us who have firms who do a lot of employment work, that obviously is more likely to get flagged than say a corporate transaction or something. So that risk balance, I imagine, for criminal work is even worse, looking at Sarah from her background. So yeah, that's absolutely, there are different risks, and people do need to be aware of those and have their lawyers review those carefully.
I suppose on the flip side, you do, if you on Copilot, you get the blanket indemnity, which you don't get with GPT-4 in Azure. So,
I think in terms of risks, from our point of view, it's been quite an interesting few months, because obviously innovation for a long time was that kind of driving of people to do new things, challenge what they're doing. And then you've now got sort of vendors sort of directly coming into certain fee earners, trying to sell directly to them. And so sometimes you're in that position of saying, that's great, loving enthusiasm, that's fantastic, but we just need to think about this, and not only think about it from a data point of view, but also think about it from a strategic point of view, because obviously you don't want them to take on a solution and then realize that actually it needs a huge knowledge management piece of work around it. It needs, it needs lots and lots of resources that are actually been earmarked for something else. So a risk for us is, I guess, keeping people in, capturing that spirit, but not crushing people's spirit, but making sure they're doing things in the guardrails. So I think that's kind of a real balancing act that I see at the moment, which has been interesting.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of really practical stuff in there. So hopefully some people were taking notes. But the point around guardrails and safety and protection and et cetera is really key. Obviously, the UK is trying to be seen as a leader in terms of AI safety. And I imagine, those of us at law firms, we've got practices where we're advising clients on some of these matters. How much in terms of your teams and implementations and thoughts around implications are you taking on board things like the new EU AI Act, or even sustainability? That was a point raised, even sustainability concerns in terms of how you're implementing technologies and maintaining, sort of great credentials.
Stunned silence. I'll jump in. I think so. From making sure that we're regulatorily compliant, we're working with our data teams. They're busy advising many of our clients on data issues surrounding generative AI and AI more generally, as our IP teams, as our employment teams actually. So we are, benefiting from the thinking that they are doing on that, and we are our first best client in some ways on that advice. On the green issue, it's tricky because yes, in aggregate, these things are very high power consumption solutions. On the other hand, you need to think about that in round compared with spending hours in a building doing work with the heating and the lighting and the cooling and everything else. So I personally, I think that we're not comparing apples with apples when we talk about me generating a document with Azure OpenAI versus one of our associates producing that same document. It's I think a more complex answer. Part of why most people are using these tools in the cloud is there's an efficiency of scale. This will be a very different thing if I was writing a business case to go and buy a data center full of NVIDIA GPUs, but oddly enough, not going to be doing that. And so I think it's a concern in the aggregate. It's probably quite difficult, on an individual law firm basis to really, account for that. We do Scope 3 emission measurement, and we'll include this within our Scope 3 as and when we've got the data in it. And Microsoft, to their credit, have always been pretty good at making that quite understandable in terms of energy consumption and the green impact of their solutions.
I think for us, in terms of the guardrails, what I've been really keen to avoid is a situation where people come to us or IT and say, can I use this, please? And it's a case of like gatekeeping, in terms of yes or no. What we really want to encourage is people to kind of be empowered to know what questions to ask themselves, obviously under sort of supervision, but sort of know what to ask, understand it, but also to understand what the implementation of that will actually mean in practice. So it's going to require project management, it's going to require knowledge management. And the reason for that is because I think it's really important for lawyers to see the value added in the firm by all of those people around those tools. So you're starting to move again away from this fee earner, non-fee earner nonsense and have a kind of value stream. So I think it's really important to actually empower the lawyers to say, right, if you want this technology, these are the people that are going to have to help you get there. And I think that's really important as well. So rather than a kind of yes or no gatekeeping aspect of technology, I think it's really bringing people into that and empowering them to understand what it actually means in practice.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because usually building business cases requires all, the technology department or somebody to go to these fee earners and say, take time out of your busy schedules to try this technology and, tell us that you love it so that we can build the business case around it and get the budget. And oddly, it's the fee earners reaching out to the technologist saying, I found something cool, can I use it? And it's this like kind of reverse dynamic. And so we have to layer in this like degree of urgency. We want to be able to meet that need and that desire, right? But measure it with kind of the appropriate assessment and experimentation and making sure that the output is really in alignment with the compliance and regulations and your client's needs and all of those things that are required to do this properly and responsibly. And so, one way to engage those fee earners, I think, is in the use case ideation. Instead of going and looking for point solutions themselves, instead of kind of using the kind of generic chatbots and things that maybe aren't leveraging your own best practice, your own precedent on documents and information, knowledge, all of that good stuff, engaging them early and often into the ideation of use case parts of your workflow. What tasks do you do that are, mundane or, that you can see efficiency gains, like starting there. Is a really great way to engage them and know that they're part of the process so that they don't go rogue and start testing out tools that are going to introduce more risk than they're worth.
Thanks. I think and I think that might hopefully address a couple of the questions around where to start. How do you identify those first priorities? in first steps. And I see Joe's also been helpfully responding to a few people.
Trying to whiz through some of the questions. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've got one person maybe on the line who's willing to come off mute and actually ask a question. So let's have a live question.
Well, that's what happens live.
Umar, are you able to come off mute yourself, or do you need one of us to do it? Trying to find you now because your hand went away.
I think we may have lost him. I don't see him in the attendees list anymore.
All right, it is a good chat. It is good.
While we're working out where we go next, I think one thing Jill said about kind of the difference between general models, Copilot, ChatGPT, those sorts of models versus stuff that is built on our own data, using retrieval augmented generation on our content, is actually a really important distinction to draw. And it's something I actually had a client asked me about a couple of weeks ago, where they'd seen, I think it was either a Forbes or a Bloomberg article. I think it was a Forbes article about, a study that had been done in the US about kind of how suitable these products were for legal research. And I went and looked at the study, and it was clearly a very well done study, but it was looking at using legal research based on just those generic tools pointing at the general internet. And that kind of comes, one of the questions was around the risk involved, as evidenced by a number of the court cases in the US. And it's the same sort of thing, that yes, that is an absolute risk, but we do need to distinguish between almost consumer grade or general business grade technologies, and how we're building them for specific use cases. And I think they are different. I've seen this in other industries. I have a background in government systems, and you saw the same sort of thing with some of those, where you'd look at a consumer use case and the media would take that as indicative of specialist tools. So we shouldn't close our minds to that risk. Is clearly something where hallucination has very serious consequences. But I also think that just because there's some media examples of people using these technologies poorly, I think we are hopefully building tools and capabilities for our lawyers and for our clients in the right way, and we just need to be mindful of how we constrain the information that's going into those tools, so that they are getting the right data to feed back out.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, completely agree. Conscious of time, I've just got a few more minutes left, but maybe try to quickly touch on this one last question, maybe if somebody wants to jump in really quickly. In terms of just the legal industry then, where do we think we're at? We actually haven't had a lot of suppliers come out with, really hit the ground running. We've got our Gen AI ready to go. It does feel like we're on a little bit of a journey from that perspective. Just anyone want to jump in with a view in terms of, are we actually as an industry moving slower, or is this actually us going gangbusters, but it's the legal industry?
I think the industry is in a fairly good place. I think that everyone's talking about it. A lot of law firms are using it now. I'm really optimistic of where we're going to be in 12 months' time for the industry. I think that as certain work types get quicker to do, particularly on the general counsel side, I think more work will spawn, basically. We've seen that for most technological revolutions before. But generally, there are different things that general counsels, the projects they couldn't even fathom doing before because it wouldn't be effective to do it or not plausible. Now it's possible, looking at proactive stuff for their businesses, and generally, you see a lot of kind of reactive stuff. I think that there will be a lot more legal work delivered across the industry, and I think it's going to be really interesting.
I agree.
Yeah, I would say you don't need a lot of different solutions if you have the right one. So I think I think what we're seeing, I certainly see this in some of the questions as well, is, we need some proof points. We need some use cases that somebody has engaged in and has seen value in, and certainly they're out there, right? And so being able to tailor them so it's not just summarize or extract, right? Like we've created tools and solutions that do those things, have those capabilities, but now it's taking and applying those capabilities to something very specific and valuable within your organization. And so how do you not just talk about summarizing a document, but how do you tailor that to a specific type of document and a specific workflow that's valuable for you? I think as the tools are adopted and used and those use cases are defined, we're going to see an explosion, right, of adoption and excitement and passion around kind of the benefits that AI will bring to an organization. It's just that like turning point of turning that learning into doing, and we're right there. And if you're leaning in, I think Alex said, and maybe even Sarah said too, like you just got to start. You just have to start finding those use cases for yourself and building that groundswell. And we're right there. We're in that moment.
Yeah, thanks. Lots of positivity, I think, and a great way to end. Thank you so much, Jill, Alex, Joe, Sarah. I think a lot of helpful insights, a lot of practical information around what people can take away, hopefully. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll bring it to a close.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.